Hi, how are you guys? My name is David Lucio, and I'm here to talk about the resolve of the Latin American gaming industry. I'm a content creator and a filmmaker from Panama. Well, actually, I'm from Colombia. I lived in Panama for the last 20 something years. And I wanted to talk about something that I've found, that I've seen throughout my experience, and that I think could help out the indie dev community in Latin America specifically. But first, I wanted to talk about the name of the talk. It's even though it's called the resolve of the Latin America gaming industry, I'm really talking about something called garra. Garra is this concept that we use to compare some soccer teams, actually, specifically. And it's so there's no one better to actually explain what garra is than Diego Forlan, the captain of the Uruguayan team. Basically, it's like when you don't have that last breath, but you always want to give more. And I think there's nothing that encapsulates more the fire and the status of the actual gaming industry in Latin America right now. So the actual name of this talk is La Guerra de la Industria de Videojuegos Latinoamericana. And it's from the point of view of a passionate gamer and content creator that just really wants to find ways to help. So who is this dude? So let me introduce myself. As I said before, my name is David Lucio. I'm a filmmaker and content creator with a big passion for games. I've been creating content in several platforms for the last 6-7 years. I work with Sony. For Sony's channel around all Latin America, we have a program that goes to 23 countries, and we co-host that with my wife. I actually do everything with my wife, and you'll see her appear in several of the slides, so I'll get there. But I'm also just like turned 35, and I'm going through a midlife crisis while trying to get in the gaming industry to help develop my region's visibility and opportunities. But I really wanted to talk about why I love games. I love games for something that I think relates to a lot of people in Latin America, and is that, like many, I actually learned English through movies and video games. We didn't get localized games in the 90s and early 2000s in our regions, so most of it was in English. So we read a lot. I'm sure I learned most of my English through Final Fantasy games and Metal Gear games and stuff like that. And also, I'm an immigrant. I flew from Colombia when I was 7 years old to Panama. And I had no communities, I have no families, I had no friends or anything. So games actually helped me through that, and games gave me a window of opportunity again to meet with new people and that aligned with my interests. And I also created some enemies because we played a lot of Mario Kart and Mario Party in 64, but I digress. And then the third reason is that it eventually led me to content creation. I've always been fascinated with the narrative aspect of games, and I've always been doing video stuff, specifically with my wife and my partners. We do a lot of video content. So when the opportunity presented itself to do something with my tools to actually pursue something that I was passionate about, was amazing. And that's when Patacoins came into the picture. Patacoins is the first platform I actually created in Panama. I did it with a couple of friends. It ended up being one of the biggest platforms of content in our country. It was something that started with a couple of friends that we just met weekly to play D&D games, and most of the time we ended up like discussing video games and movies. So I wasn't that big of a consumer. I wasn't that big of a consumer of like YouTube channels and stuff like that. So I really didn't know what type of content was out there. But I did know that I would love to see the content that we were basically doing with my wife and our friends. So that's where Patacoins comes in. And it actually created a lot of opportunities for us, because that's when we started covering big events like E3 and PAXes. We started a podcast where we talk to different talents in our region. We helped produce the first Comic-Con in Panama by developing some talks and some panels, one specifically dedicated on how women in Panama specifically are dominating the content creation side of gaming. We've done a lot of events to meet our community and to help them thrive in some ways. And we've also done events in Panama with several sponsors for instance, that picture down there, it's we did a big event in Panama for Pokemon Go when that blew up. And from this, Patacoins lasted for like 5-6 years. It became really big. It was really cool. But then my wife and I, Stefania and I, wanted to try new things. So we started El David Estefi Show. And that's the thing we're doing right now. So it's basically a space where we talk about games, movies, and everything. We're specifically a Twitch channel where we try to focus a lot in indie games. And we've been trying to tell people about wish listing, which is like a term that in Latin America we don't really use. So it's something that has a big importance for us. We've been working on this for the past 2 years, and that led me eventually to understand the power and value of community. Without the community we ended up growing with, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing right now. And I also want to think that when you do have a community, you have a responsibility to use your platform for good in some way. And the way we're trying to do it is through helping other artists or other up-and-coming creators to have a platform to jump into. And in that search of community and search for allowing our community to grow and thrive, I started thinking about gaming communities. And that's the first time I went to a mix. And the mix blew my mind. Like, that was the first time that I came face to face with a lot of indie developers, like side by side, and talked to them about their experience and everything. And what I realized being there is that, without me knowing it, because we were always trying to look for Spanish-speaking people in the dev industry, in the game industry, to actually interview for our channels, but it was really hard for us to find them. And in an event like Mix and another small event for indie titles, we actually met a lot of dev teams from Mexico and Argentina, Colombia, Uruguay, and that blew my mind. I understood that searching for Latin American games was hard, and it shouldn't be that hard, specifically because I think representation really matters. And I'm not talking only about seeing yourself on screen, which really is hard for us in Latin America. Like, we're talking about 3% of the characters in games are Latino, and then from that 3%, only 5 is playable. So we do want to see us on screen, and there's so much potential from everything, from our culture, from our heritage, from the stories we tell, from the backgrounds we come from, what we've learned through games. Like, for instance, this is a great example of a game called Crystals, which was developed in Colombia. For most people, they see the picture on the right and they think, okay, this game has great visuals and lore and world design, and that's amazing, and it really does. The game is amazing. But on the other side of it, like for me as a Colombian, watching this was like, oh my God, I can't fucking believe I'm actually fighting baddies in front of El Santuario de las Lajas. That's a place that's really important in my country. And seeing yourself is huge. And not only being able to relate to a character specifically, but relating to a world and to the experience and the color palette and everything. We have something in Latin America coming from Colombia that's called El Realismo Mágico. It's like a magical realism, where we have found how our culture is so fused with the fantastical and the dreamlike. And I think that being captured through games can be fantastic, and we are thriving. I mean, even though I'm going to talk about a lot of struggles that I think the Latin American gaming industry is going through, I do think that we're thriving through a lot of different experiences. Like, just this group of 6 games, we're talking about Crystals, that's a turn-based RPG from Colombia. We have Bug Fables, that's a Paper Mario type RPG game that came from Panama. Mulaka is an action-adventure game from Mexico. Tunche is a side-scrolling beat-em-up from Peru. Aztec Forgotten Gods just came out, and it really explores the Aztec culture and the lore behind it. And even Tremaine, it's a puzzle platformer with a great story that comes from Argentina. So we're really infusing our DNA in a lot of genres, and I think that can only explode. And on top of that, the industry as a whole is really growing. And steadily growing year by year. You can see how in PC, mobile, and console, there's growth year by year. Specifically, for instance, in the mobile area, it's growing it's almost doubling itself year on year. And I think, well, not I think, one of the main reasons for this is, and that's one of the struggles I'm going to talk later on, the financial opportunities we have. Like, not a lot of people can actually afford a console or a big ass PC in our countries. So we do have that gadget in our phone. We do have a cell phone. So a lot of our developers are actually developing experience for mobile that are doing really good. And that's one way that indie games can actually get in the hands of Latin American consumers. And the other cool thing about it is that that has led to a growth also on the content creation side. Like, just last year, the past 2 years, we've seen how our content creators are breaking audience records all around the world. Just the Graph, I know he's from Spain, and we're talking about 2.4 million people watching him. But I think that the important information to get out of this is that that's the market that's out there. That's the size of the audience that's looking for Spanish led content. It's huge. And that's also something that will relate eventually to something that I think it's really important for indie devs, and it's watching or seeing South Latin America as a really, really big audience for opportunity for audiences. Like I was telling just that Twitch grew twice almost in all of our countries in the last couple of years during the pandemic. But even though all of that is growing, even though the consumer side is growing, even though the industry as a whole is growing, even though the content creator opportunities are really, really thriving, and we're actually developing a lot of games in the last couple of years, we do go through a lot of struggles. And I think you can sum them down to 5. The first one is education. Most of our countries don't have real careers behind game development or animation or programming or anything like that. That's based basically in the sense that the industry of games is not really recognized as an industry still in most of our countries, and the ones that do are starting to create projects and scholarships and stuff, but it's not a big thing. So actually, for people in our country, in our region, to actually get a good education and start developing games is really hard. The other one is visibility. Like I was telling you, finding our games is hard. We do have to go to an event in person and just skim through and find people and talk to them. And that's a great way to actually meet a network around, but it's a tough place to be in as an industry if you have to actually go to these types of shows to find you. Not only finding the game, but actually finding out they are Latin American. We also have problems with tech. I was watching a talk yesterday, and they were talking about how, because of visa restrictions and financial restrictions and everything, a lot of teams from Mexico and Argentina and Colombia and big countries have been just like really putting their dev kits in their bags and bringing them over. Like, just having access to the tech is really hard. Financing, again, I think this has come several times, not only from the consumer side, it's tough, but also most of the arts in our countries have developed in the last couple of years because of support from governmental initiatives. So let's say like the film industry in Panama or Colombia, we have a law that states that the government, through their cultural branch, has to actually donate money or help finance and bootstrap projects in film. And that has helped actually the film industry to thrive. We need this, and we're getting some of this in some of our countries, but that's literally something that we depend on. So it all goes down to crowdfunding and stuff. And I'm going to talk about some struggle that crowdfunding has too. And then finally, localization. And this is something that has been part of the industry for a while now. And not only thinking about the way people can consume games, because we're not a bilingual region at all. Not only how consumers consume games, but also for dev teams, it's an additional expense that we have to think to actually publish a game. So all of this combined are big obstacles for us. And how do I think we can battle this, or at least what I found in my years creating content and trying to create communities and stuff? I think this is the biggest takeaway of all, or at least what I've gotten from the gaming industry in the last couple of years, and that's collaboration. It is a fragment of the industry that depends on collaboration to actually keep going through. So I'm going to share some examples of stuff we've done with our communities and our platforms here in Panama to actually help on the aspects that I think might need help through collaborating. The first one is finding points of collaboration between development teams and communities or content creators. For instance, this is a game by World Eater Games. It's a game called Bittersweet Birthday. It's a boss battle RPG type game, and they were looking to crowdfund. It wasn't actually going steadily, so we began a campaign where we gave the game, one of the boss fights, to a lot of content creators in Panama, and they started streaming it through a challenge that was called the Bittersweet Challenge, and it was to see how many tries it got them to actually beat the boss, and that spread the word, and they got their game funded like in that weekend. So those types of collaborations are really good for our games. Also, collaborating between devs, and I know there's a lot of communities already in social networks that I'm going to talk to you later on that actually help in this way, but also like just small teams just network and find other teams and find ways to collaborate. Like we are through an event that we do that's called Twitchella that I'm going to talk to you about in a further slide. One of the things we're trying to do is create opportunities for academia and for people to actually go and learn stuff. So doing this and creating windows again where devs can collaborate with devs and talk and share ideas, it's really helpful. Like for instance, when we did this panel, we had like a 30-minute cool off before the chat, and they were just talking about how they were working. And one of them was having issues in the moment getting their money from one of the crowdfunding sites because they were in Panama and they couldn't get an account number to get it in, and then Jeff from Colombia tell them how they did. So like only getting those spaces where you can actually exchange information is great. And if you can add that on top of like an event where you can actually reach bigger communities and maybe help, what's the word I'm looking for? Help inspire new up and coming talent. I mean, that's amazing. And also collaboration between content creators. Like we as content creators have to understand that we are part of the gaming industry as a whole. And our gaming industry is going to thrive even more when we understand that we have to help out, but also helping each other out, because that way we can all grow. Like for instance, we do a lot of events in Panama. Like even though we have a social media platform and we do have the Twitch channel, for us, one of the main focuses of our platform is to constantly create opportunities to collaborate with other content creators, not only for the idea of bringing new audiences, but also hopefully give a platform for up and coming small creators that can use our platform to actually get to a bigger audience. And also understand that even though we are part of the gaming industry and we're like a sub niche of the gaming industry, of the Latin American gaming industry, if we can open our doors and collaborate outside of our borders, it's amazing. One of the things I've learned specifically from the indie game dev community is that everyone's really nice and everyone's constantly looking for opportunities to collaborate or help or inspire. So I think looking through roads to actually collaborate with other indie devs that might not be from our regions might be a great opportunity. So that takes me to Twitchella. Twitchella is the event I was telling you about. Twitchella is a nonprofit charity streaming fest that we organize from Panama. We do it at least 2 or 3 times a year. We raise funds that it has like a couple of pillars that are actually what we want the event to succeed in. One of them, it's of course the charity part of it. And we've been working with UNICEF for the past couple of years. So we raised up most of our funds to help underprivileged children in our country, in our region. The other aspect of it is to actually be a platform for new content creators. Like we have different sizes of content creators, but we're always trying to have a couple at least per day that are up and coming, that are just starting or have small audiences, so that they can use the event and the platform and that networking to actually show their content to new audiences. And finally, create opportunities for education. This is one of the main things that I've always tried to do. And we've had the opportunity, like I was saying, of collaborating beyond our borders and just knocking on doors and asking for help. And we've had a lot of panels where people have actually learned a lot. We've had the Desarrollo de Videojuegos in Latin America panel. It was a talk between Jose Gracia, Ricardo Noriega, and Jeff Cardenas. 3 of them are developers from Latin America, from Panama and Colombia. So that gave a window for people to actually understand how they're working from Latin America, what their struggles are, what they have learned and stuff like that. We've also had panels with Troy Baker talking about his career, Kat Wensky talking about the audio design and and composition. We've had Philip Culiano that worked in Hazelight, in It Takes Two, and A Way Out, and he's now developing his own game. And he was talking about how people get scholarships to study where he studied, and places to actually knock on doors to get new opportunities. Melissa, of course, we have also had her in the past couple of in one of the last Twitchellas to talk about her career and technical game design. So this is stuff that we are doing that I think actually help, but I think there's something that the wider industry can do to help as well. And that's understanding how big of an audience and how great of an audience Latin America is for indie. Not only because of the financial efforts that we have to go through, not a lot of people can actually afford a $70 game. So like the price point of indie games tend to be really appealing for people in our region. And also it's a huge ass market. Like, I mean, I'm talking about 23 countries. And like I was showing before about just talking about audiences on Twitch, it's like a big audience. So I think it's a great opportunity for indie games to market themselves in Latin America, something that's not actually happening, and see them thrive, and actually give also opportunities for people in our country to learn English through your games, to make friends through your games, and maybe even get inspired to develop their own games. And I think there's 3 things that can be done to actually move this forward, or move the needle forward. One is find these windows of collaboration with indie devs in Latin America. There's a lot of communities that I'm going to share in one of the last slides that you can actually go to and knock your doors and find ways to collaborate. Also finding communities. Again, those communities are going to be in one of the last slides, but a lot of people in those communities are looking for opportunities to help the indie Latin American industry to thrive. So there's a good way to actually help. And find our games. Like I was saying, it's really hard. We battle and we struggle with visibility, but in these events, there's always a guy from Mexico or Chile or Uruguay trying his best with his English learned through Final Fantasy to actually find opportunities to collaborate and network. So let's just work together to not depend on Garra alone. We do have Garra. I think the resolve of the Latin American game industry is an actual thing. It's an industry that's thriving, even though it has all of those struggles. And just by picking a broom and helping out, I think the industry is going long ways. But I think the industry as a whole can actually help us move the needle forward. So that's my talk. I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments. I do want to share a couple of resources while you think about any questions. But basically, it's these 3 small slides. The first one is, where are we? Like, how can you find us? Most of our the community is based in Facebook groups. So Facebook groups is a great way to start. Most of our industries actually market through WhatsApp because it's the biggest social platform we have. And this is where I think there's a great opportunity to actually be on the lookout. A lot of content creators are turning to TikTok in Latin America to share what they're doing on their Twitch channels and on their YouTube videos and stuff like that. So if you're looking for content creators and stuff, I think this might be the best way to look for them. And if you're looking for game devs, there's also a great way to look for them. These are other examples of video games in Latin America. Again, this is like a really specific list. I just wanted to share some diversity, like with a 2.5 action adventure from Drachma Studios in Mexico called Candlelight. And we have puzzle platformers and tower defense games, flying sims, fighting games, puzzle stealth games. Like, there's a lot. So just go looking for us, especially in small events, and look for communities. We have communities like indies that just had a talk yesterday, so you can look for that in the vault. Game Devs Mex. We have the game from Game Audio Latam that has a talk tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. DVJS Mexico is a big one. Women in Game X has a talk here, I think, at 4 p.m. on Thursday. I don't know if it's specifically them, but I know there's some people from the game, Women in Game X, that are part of the talk. And finally, Latinx in gaming, I think, is huge. And they also have a talk Thursday, 10 a.m. And these are my socials, just in case you want to follow up, contact, or follow. You can find me in Twitter and Instagram in both David Lucius or Twitchelapa, and El David Estefi Show. You can look for us on Twitch and talk and hang out. So yeah, that's my talk. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
I have a question, David.
Yep.
And a bit of comments too.
Thank you.
My name is Daniel. I am a Puerto Rican. I was born and raised in New York. But over the last 2 years, cultural representation in video games has been the focal point of my work. As an outsider looking in, you know, I may be a part of the diaspora, but I don't have the same experiences that all of my people have. And so for somebody who wants to go indie, hopefully one day, what would your advice be for me? Yeah. I hope that I was a little bit clear.
I think that, well, first of all, thank you for being in the talk and having a question. I actually think, and this is something that I apply to what I do, and is I think we sometimes underestimate the value of how we inject our DNA into everything. I think Latinos coming from Puerto Rico or coming from La Punta de Argentina are really, they're always injecting what they do to what they do. And I'm a big defender on that things don't have to represent everything you do every time you do it. And what I mean by that is, like, I grew watching Spielberg. I love how Spielberg directed films. And I understand that I have a responsibility to maybe show people through my films what a Colombian experience is. But I also have a lot of sensibility that comes from the movies that I watched. So my point of view, even though it might be westernized in some way or another, have been injected with my experience as a Colombian and living in Panama and all that stuff. So I think that the first thing that anyone in our region that has to do in any creative endeavor is just understand and appreciate how much of their identity they can actually inject in what they're doing, even though at a first glance, it might not feel Latin enough. I don't know if that made any sense, but hope that helped.
That actually really did help. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Hi, David. Thank you so much for your talk. I'm working in the climate game space, and one of the things that we're finding is that well, we've known for a long time that the global South as a whole suffers from climate impacts far more than a lot of countries in the global North. Do you know, how do you see, if at all, the indie game scene in South America responding to that? Do you see them trying to tackle those kinds of issues in games? Are there any communities that are building up around that? Do people need funding, information? Do you know what the sort of needs or wants are related especially to climate change in games? Thank you.
I'm not that, thank you. What's your name again? I'm sorry.
Felix, thank you.
Okay. No, what I would say is I'm not that, I haven't researched at all on that aspect of games. There's a lot of initiatives, specifically like from Brazil and Argentina and Mexico of like young people initiatives to actually help with climate change. I do know most of the initiatives that are actually supported by governmental funds in a region tend to be academic or related to an initiative from the government. So I'm sure that there's points of contact with the governments and their own initiatives to actually help out, that you can actually find dev teams and put them in contact with those government facilities to see if there's opportunities for both of them to collaborate. Like, for instance, in Panama, we have a lot of stuff that we're doing because of the canal. The canal basically destroyed part of the forest here in Panama. So they're constantly at the Canal of Panama. They're looking for ways to actually help out and spread the word. So they've actually contacted animators and programmers in Panama to develop apps and games, not only to teach people about the story of the Panama Canal, but also like do some reparations on the story of like minorities and people of color in Panama. And there's also a part of it that states about the conservation, how to conserve better some of the fauna and flora that had been lost through the canal. So I think that those might be a good place to start, just like contacting the initiatives of the government and maybe dev teams from those countries and find ways for them to collaborate and create stuff.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
We've got time for one more question.
Buenas tardes. My name is Sebastian Rivera. I'm Colombian, born and raised in the United States, but saludos. But you know, I come from Tuluá, a little small town, and I remember, you know, announcing to my family of choosing this career. It's a very niche market in Latin America and South America. Not many people know about this, but it's something that really sees that a lot of Latin Americans, they want to be part of this market. And I think you discussed it a little bit about these opportunities are not truly there. Any words of advice of like how to let this business grow inside it, not only let it be only for indie developers, where it's only one person or two people, but let this market grow as for European markets, Asian markets, American markets, where we could probably see one day that there might be a Latin America video game company that stretches out.
I mean, I think it. I don't want to be like repetitive with what I said before, but I really think it goes down to collaboration between our borders. Latin America has always thrived in understanding that it's one as Latin America. Most of the biggest initiatives, both in music and film and everything that has gone through art in our region, have gone from collaboration between countries. I know there's a lot of communities, for instance, in one of the last slides, like in these slides, that tend to collaborate between different countries. And I think before we think about being seen outside of our region, we just have to understand that as has happened before with different initiatives in our region, we have to work together and maybe create a coalition of game devs from different countries. Like right now, I think that Mexico, Argentina, and Colombia have their own like actual like finance groups, governmental groups that are battling for opportunities in the game industry department. But I think that the only way for the region to understand that industry as an industry is for it to grow from within. And I only think that happens through collaboration. I also think that having an indie industry, it's almost like, I don't know if this is a term that's going to translate well, but la cantera, like having the people in the bench. When you have like a soccer team, you have a couple of people in the bench. I think the way that bench works is that it keeps training those people to actually eventually replace this. And what has happened with the indie game development community is that when one of the games really shines, like for instance, Crystals, and I had this talk with Jeff the last time we spoke, what happens is then headhunters start looking for the talent within that game, and they take them to their bigger teams in Europe, States, or Asia. So actually having an indie dev community and actually thriving there, I think it's a great starting point. It's like when you shoot short films to eventually get financed for their feature film. So even though I understand that eventually the goal would be to grow to a point where we can actually talk beyond Latin America, I do think that we have to first collaborate within, grow within, stamp something in the ground, and then from there go on. And I think that the sky is the limit, basically.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gusto, Sebastián.